Why does a journey that requires only days sometimes consume an entire lifetime? The question is not about geography, but about the nature of transformation. When the book of Deuteronomy states that the distance from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea is an 11-day journey, it is not offering a travel note. It is presenting a theological paradox. The people of Israel did not wander because they were lost in the desert. They wandered because they were not yet ready to arrive. The wilderness, therefore, is not simply a place on a map. It is a condition of the human soul when it resists the demands of faith. The historical framework of the narrative, preserved in the Book of Numbers, is clear enough. A people recently liberated from Egypt begin their journey toward a land promised to them by God. They are led by Moses and guided by a visible manifestation of divine presence and sustained by provisions that, in any other context, would be considered extraordinary. Yet what unfolds is not a swift progression toward fulfillment, but a prolonged period of delay, marked by repetition, frustration, and loss. The question that presses itself upon the reader is not what happened, but why it happened in this way. At the surface level, the explanation appears straightforward. The generation that left Egypt failed to enter the promised land because of disobedience. Yet this answer, while correct, is insufficient unless we ask a deeper question. Why did disobedience persist in the face of such overwhelming evidence of divine faithfulness? The plagues in Egypt, the crossing of the sea, the daily provision of manna. These are not minor signs. They represent a sustained revelation of God's power and care. And yet, they do not produce the kind of trust that would allow the people to move forward without hesitation. To understand this, one must consider the psychological residue of slavery. The Israelites were not merely oppressed externally, they were shaped internally by the conditions of their captivity. Slavery forms habits of thought, dependence, fear of uncertainty, and a diminished sense of agency. Freedom, when it arrives, does not immediately erase these patterns. Instead, it exposes them. In Egypt, the people's survival depended on submission to a visible authority. In the wilderness, they are asked to trust an invisible God. This transition is not simply a change in circumstance, it is a transformation of consciousness. So this is why the early stages of the journey are marked by complaint. When faced with hunger, the people long for Egypt. When confronted with thirst, they question the purpose of their deliverance. These reactions are not merely expressions of discomfort. They reveal a deeper inability to interpret their experience in light of God's promise. The wilderness becomes a mirror in which their internal condition is reflected. Each crisis exposes not the absence of God's provision, but the fragility of their trust. The leadership of Moses plays a crucial role in this dynamic. He stands as a mediator between God and the people, a figure who both represents divine authority and shares in human limitation. His own journey is not without struggle. He intercedes on behalf of the people, bears their complaints, and at times expresses his own frustration. Yet his presence also underscores a central truth, that guidance is available, but it does not eliminate the necessity of response. The people are not abandoned, they are invited to follow. The turning point in the narrative occurs when the people arrive at the threshold of the Promised Land. At Kadesh Barnea, spies are sent to survey the land. Their report confirms the richness of the territory, but it also highlights the presence of formidable avibim. The response of the people is immediate and decisive. Fear overrides memory. The God who defeated Egypt is forgotten in the face of new challenges. The majority report becomes a lens through which reality is interpreted, and that lens is shaped not by faith, but by anxiety. Only two figures, Joshua and Caleb, offer a different perspective. They do not deny the difficulty of the situation, but they interpret it within the framework of God's promise. Their confidence is not rooted in the strength of Israel, but in the reliability of God. Yet their voice is rejected. The people choose the interpretation that aligns with their fear, even though it contradicts the evidence of their own experience. It is at this moment that the 11-day journey becomes a 40-year wandering. The delay is not imposed arbitrarily. It is the consequence of a decision. The generation that refused to enter the land is told that they will not see it. Instead, they will remain in the wilderness until that generation passes away. This judgment is often understood as punishment, but it can also be seen as a form of consistency. A people unwilling to trust cannot inhabit a promise that requires trust. The wilderness becomes, in effect, the only environment compatible with their condition. The number 40 carries symbolic weight in the biblical tradition. It signifies a period of testing, preparation, and transformation. Yet in this case, the transformation is incomplete. The wilderness becomes a place where time passes, but growth is limited. The repetition of complaints, the recurrence of crises, and the persistence of doubt suggest that the external conditions of the wilderness do not automatically produce internal change. Transformation requires not only time, but willingness. This raises a critical theological question. Why does God allow this prolonged wandering to continue? If the people are unready, why not compel readiness? The answer lies in the nature of the relationship between God and humanity. Divine guidance does not negate human freedom. The people are led, but they are not forced. The wilderness, therefore, becomes a space where the consequences of choice are allowed to unfold. It is not a place of abandonment, but of exposure. What is revealed is not God's absence, but the depth of human resistance. At the same time, the narrative makes clear that the wilderness is not devoid of grace. The people are sustained in ways that defy ordinary explanation. Their clothing does not wear out. Their basic needs are met. Even in judgment, there is provision. This dual reality, discipline and care, reflects a nuanced understanding of divine action. God does not withdraw completely, nor does he remove the consequences of disobedience. Instead, he accompanies the people within the very condition that their choices have created. So, the figure of Moses again becomes central in this context. He intercedes repeatedly, preventing the complete destruction of the people. His role illustrates the possibility of mediation within a broken relationship. Yet even Moses is not exempt from the tension of the wilderness. His own failure, striking the rock instead of speaking to it, results in his exclusion from the promised land. This detail reinforces the seriousness of the journey. Leadership does not eliminate accountability, it intensifies it. As the narrative progresses, a new generation emerges, one that has not experienced Egypt directly, but has grown up in the wilderness. This generation is shaped not by slavery, but by transition. They have witnessed both the consequences of disobedience and the persistence of divine provision. When they stand again at the threshold of the land, the question is no longer whether God is able, but whether they are willing to trust. The repetition of the journey, then, is not redundant. It is pedagogical. The wilderness becomes a teacher, revealing the patterns that must be broken and the dispositions that must be formed. The delay, while costly, serves a purpose that is not immediately visible. It prepares a people who can receive the promise not merely as a possession, but as a responsibility. Yet the deeper significance of the 40 years lies beyond the historical narrative. It speaks to a recurring pattern in human experience. The distance between promise and fulfillment is often extended not by external obstacles, but by internal resistance. So one can be delivered from a situation without being transformed in one's understanding. One can move physically while remaining spiritually stationary. In contemporary life, the wilderness takes many forms. It appears in seasons of uncertainty, in prolonged struggles, in situations where progress seems elusive despite effort. The question that arises is similar to that faced by Israel. Why does it take so long? The answer, as in the ancient narrative, is rarely simple. It involves the interplay of circumstance, choice, and transformation. The story challenges the assumption that time alone produces growth. The Israelites spent 40 years in the wilderness, but not all of that time resulted in maturity. Growth requires engagement, an active response to what is being revealed. Without such engagement, time becomes repetition rather than progression. The same patterns are rehearsed, the same fears reinforced. At the same time, the narrative offers a measure of hope. The failure of one generation does not nullify the promise. It delays it, reshapes it, and transfers it to those who are willing to receive it. This suggests that divine purpose operates on a scale that transcends individual timelines. What is lost in one moment may be recovered in another, though not always by the same participants. The theological tension remains. Why did an 11-day journey become a lifetime? Because the journey was never only about reaching a destination. It was about becoming a people capable of inhabiting that destination. The land in itself was not the ultimate goal. It was the context in which a relationship with God would be lived out. Without the formation of that relationship, the land would lose its meaning. And so the wilderness stands as both a warning and an invitation. It warns of the consequences of resisting transformation, of allowing fear to override trust, of remaining attached to past patterns even when they lead to stagnation. At the same time, it invites reflection. It asks whether the delays in our own lives are merely obstacles, or whether they reveal something about our readiness to move forward. The lingering thought is not entirely comfortable. It suggests that the distance between where we are and where we are called to be may not be as great as it appears. The greater distance may lie within, in the space between what we know and what we trust, between what we are promised and what we are willing to believe. O Lord, who leads your people even through the wilderness, teach us to trust you when the journey feels long and uncertain. When fear rises and doubt clouds our vision, remind us of your faithfulness in every step we have taken. Form our hearts to be patient, obedient, and willing to grow, even in seasons of waiting. Keep us from clinging to what is behind, and give us courage to move forward in faith. May we not wander in resistance, but walk in trust until we enter fully into the purpose you have prepared for us. Amen.